My only reward for fixing that alien ship was the truth. And this truth, what the being from another world showed me about the figure of Jesus is the key to a completely different story. Forget religion, forget what they taught you in Sunday school. I'm talking about a connection that was hidden, a missing piece that will make your own existence fit together. I just warn you, this information has a priest. She will illuminate some blind spots in your life, but you can create shadows in all others. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of tea, or just some water and sit back as we begin this journey together. What Frank Morrison witnessed in Montana was not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a revelation that was frozen in time for 2 millennia. Now let me tell you how it all began. I fixed an alien ship, and what he showed me about Jesus will change everything you think you know. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about something that's been hidden. Something that once you understand it will make your life make sense in a way it never has before. But I must warn you, what you'll discover may be disturbing. It may challenge everything you have been taught. And once you see it, there's no undoing it. Because what happened to Frank Morrison in that field in Montana will open your eyes to something that has been hidden for 2,000 years. Now, let me tell you how it all started. Frank Morrison was lying in bed listening to the storm when the loud bang happened. It wasn't thunder. It was different, deeper, as if something heavy had hit the ground with tremendous force. At 62, divorced and living alone in rural Montana, Frank had learned to ignore strange noises. It was probably a tree falling. He'd deal with that in the morning. He turned onto his side and finally managed to sleep. The morning arrived bright with bright sunshine contrasting with the night storm. Frank got up, made coffee, and looked out the kitchen window to inspect the damage, and it stopped completely. There was something in the field, something big metallic reflecting the sun in a strange way. "What the hell fell in there?" he muttered, taking old binoculars from a drawer. Through the lenses he saw better. It wasn't plain wreckage. It wasn't anything he recognized. The shape was wrong, too smooth, too perfect. Frank put the binoculars back, pulled on his boots, and went out. As he approached, his heart raced. The air smelled strange. The structure was the size of a small trailer, curved smooth, no visible seams. Metal that looked almost liquid in the light, changing color slightly as it moved around. And there was something working on her. Frank stopped 10 meters away, his blood running cold. The figure was humanoid, but definitely not human. Grayish skin, longer limbs, larger head. It was crouched beside an open panel in the ship, fiddling with something that glowed with a bluish light. Frank took a step back. His boot cracked against a dry twig. The creature spun around instantly. Huge, pitch-black eyes fixed on Frank. They stood frozen, human and alien, staring at each other across of Montana grass. Frank felt every muscle lock up. He couldn't move. He couldn't scream. He just stared into those impossible eyes. And then the creature raised one hand slowly, palm forward, the universal gesture of, "I am not a threat." But Frank was already running. He turned and ran back to the house as fast as his 62-year-old legs would carry him. His heart pounding, his breath coming in desperate gasps. He entered the house. He locked the door. He ran to the window and looked through the curtains. The creature hadn't followed. It was still there near the ship, watching the house, motionless. "This isn't happening," Frank whispered. "This can't be happening." He reached for his phone. He was going to call the police, and say what, "There's an alien in my field." Frank sank into a chair in the kitchen, his hands shaking violently. He squeezed his eyes shut. He breathed. When he opened his eyes 10 minutes later and looked out the window again, the creature was still there. But now it was waving. No, not exactly waving, gesturing, pointing to the ship, then to something on the ground, a helpless movement. And suddenly Frank understood the thing was stuck. Ship broken. No way out. "It's not my problem," Frank said aloud to the empty house. It's definitely not my problem. He forced himself to turn away from the window. He made more coffee. He tried to do something normal. But an hour later, he found himself looking out the window again. The creature was still there now, sitting next to the ship, head down, defeated. And Frank, despite the terror, despite the impossibility, felt something strange. Pity. "Oh, for the love of," he grumbled. "I'm going to regret this." Frank grabbed his rifle from the wall. He wasn't going to use it, probably, but he held it anyway as he slowly walked out of the house. He walked toward the creature, stopping 5 meters away. Rifle not aimed, but visible. The creature lifted its head, those black eyes fixed on him, and then voice not from his mouth, from inside Frank's head. "I won't hurt you." Frank almost dropped his rifle in surprise. You, you're in my head. Sorry, it's the only way I can communicate. I don't have vocal cords like yours. Frank tightened his grip on the rifle. "What are you? Where did you come from?" "Far, very far, and I need to go, but the ship is damaged. I can't fix it alone." The creature gestured to the open panel. Frank could see inside. Incomprehensible technology. Lights, flickering wires, or something like wires. Disconnected. "You're a mechanic. I see tools in your shed. I see parts. You understand how things work." "How do you know that?" Frank asked, still not lowering his rifle. "I scouted your property before landing. I tried to land away from you, but the storm damaged systems. I crashed here by accident." Frank was silent. Part of him screamed to leave. Call the authorities, do anything but help. But another part, the part that spent 40 years fixing broken engines, saw a mechanical problem. They saw someone trapped, powerless. "Why should I help you?" he finally asked. The creature was silent for a moment then. "Because I'm a mechanic too, from a different world, but the same essence. I fix broken things like you. And now I'm broken and alone and scared." Frank felt something tighten in his chest because he recognized it. Loneliness, fear, the feeling of being trapped with no way out. "And if I help, will you leave and never come back?" "Yes. As soon as the ship is working, I'll leave immediately." Frank looked at the ship, at the creature, at the rifle in his hands, and he made a decision that would change his life completely. "Okay." He lowered his rifle slowly. "I'll see what I can do, but if you try anything weird, I won't. I promise, Mom." Frank looked around nervously. The property was isolated, but not completely. The occasional car passed by on the road. A plane flew overhead. If anyone saw that erst, he pointed to the ship. "My shed is big. I can pull this in. No one will see. Can you move? I have a truck with a tow truck. If your ship doesn't weigh a ton, I can get it. It weighs less than it looks. The material is different." Frank retrieved his old F-250 pickup truck, which he'd owned for 15 years. He positioned it and connected the winch cable to the ship's frame. The creature watched, those impossible eyes following every movement. "Hold on," Frank muttered, turning on the winch. To his surprise, the ship moved relatively easily, far too light for its size, as if it were made of something that defied any physics he knew. It took 20 minutes to position the ship inside the warehouse. Frank closed the large gates once he was inside, his heart still pounding. The creature walked in behind, moving with that strange fluidity that wasn't entirely natural. There. Frank wiped sweat from his forehead. "Now no one sees. And you stay here too. Don't leave." "Got it. Understood. Thank you." Frank looked at the ship under the light from the shed. Up close, it was even more impressive and frightening. "So," he said, still processing the absurdity of the situation, "how do we begin?" And as the creature began to explain telepathically, strangely but surprisingly clearly, Frank Morrison had no idea that over the next 3 days, repairing an impossible ship with an otherworldly being, he would discover truths about Jesus that would shake everything he had believed for 62 years. The next 3 days were the strangest of Frank Morrison's life. The first day was mostly controlled panic. Frank worked on the ship with shaking hands, hyper aware of the alien creature, just feet away watching his every move. This here, Frank pointed to a component that looked like a motor, but wasn't exactly one. Does this generate propulsion? Yes, but the central crystal is cracked. It needs replacing or repairing. Frank examined the crystal, a hexagonal structure that glowed faintly with a bluish light. A crack ran down one side. I don't have any replacement alien crystals in my workshop, he said dryly. Can you improvise with earthly materials? Frank studied the part. 40 years as a mechanic taught him to improvise with what he had. I can try. High-strength epoxy resin fiber reinforcement. It won't be pretty, but it might work. And he worked. Experienced hands doing what they have always done, fixing broken things. On the second day, fear began to give way to curiosity. Frank was soldering a connection when he finally asked a question that had been rattling around in his head. Where are you from? I mean, how far is it star system you call Zeta Reticuli? Approximately 39 light years from here. Frank nearly dropped the welder. 39 light years. How the hell did you get here? Spackham warp ship. I don't travel across distance. I travel around it. Frank shook his head. That should be impossible for your current technology. Yes, but physics is universal. It's just a matter of understanding the correct laws. Frank went back to welding, his mind spinning, after a few minutes of silence. So you can go anywhere with this ship within certain limitations. Yes. Why do you ask? Frank hesitated. The question was going to sound ridiculous, but he had to ask. Can you go to heaven? The creature tilted its head in that almost human but not quite human movement. Heaven, are you referring to a religious concept? Yeah, like where God is, where people go after they die. This heaven, I understand confusion. No, Frank. Heaven as you imagine it, the physical place in the clouds where God resides, does not exist. There is no such dimension or location. Frank felt something sink in his stomach. So there's no heaven? There's no God? I didn't say that. I said there's no physical place I can travel to. But source, what you call God, exists, just not in the way religions teach like this. God is not an entity on a throne in heaven judging you. He is a field of consciousness, a creative force, the source of all that exists, and he is everywhere simultaneously, including within you. Frank dropped the welder and turned fully to face the creature. Inside me, are you saying God is here? He touched his chest. Yes, it always has been. The problem is that they taught you to look outside when you should be looking inside. But the Bible says the Bible was written by humans, translated by humans, interpreted by humans with their own agendas. It contains truths, yes, but also distortions, especially about the nature of God and what Jesus really taught. Frank felt his heart race. Do you know about Jesus? We know a lot about Jesus of Nazareth. We watched him. We watched what he taught, and we watched how his teachings were distorted after he died. You observed Jesus, the real Jesus? Yes. Your species was at a critical juncture 2,000 years ago, just as it is now. So we watched closely. Jesus was interesting. Frank sat down on the workbench, his legs suddenly weak. Interesting how he understood something that most humans did not. He understood universal laws of manifestation, how thought and emotion create physical reality, and he tried to teach that manifestation creating reality. What are you talking about? The creature approached, those black eyes fixed on Frank. You pray, don't you, Frank? You ask God for things. Frank suddenly felt exposed. How did this thing know? Yes, I pray every day for years. And what do you ask for help? Health. May things get better. The basics. And what happens? Are your prayers answered? Frank laughed bitterly. Never. They're never answered. So either God doesn't exist or he doesn't care about me. Or you're praying wrong. What do you mean wrong? I talk to God. I humbly ask for help. I give thanks. What's wrong with that? Everything. Because that's not how it works. That's not how Jesus taught it to work. But they've twisted it so much that now billions do what you do. They ask and wait, and nothing happens. And then they think God has abandoned them. Frank felt sudden anger. Then enlighten me. How is it supposed to work? Finish repairing the ship and I'll show you. Not through words. You wouldn't believe it. I'll show you Jesus, the real one, teaching what he really taught before they distort everything. Can you show Jesus how holographic recordings we've been watching and recording for 2,000 years? I can play them back. I can show you what he really said, and then you'll understand why your prayers never worked. Frank was silent, processing. Part of him thought this was crazy, but another part, the part that had prayed for decades without an answer, needed to know. Okay, he said finally, I'll finish your ship and you show me. Deal done. On the third day, Frank hit the last connection and retreated there. I think it's fixed. I can't test it without turning it on, and I don't want to blow up my shed. It's not going to explode. I feel the energy flowing correctly. You have talent, Frank. 40 years of practice. Even so, thank you. Without you, I'd be stuck here indefinitely. So are you going to show, what did you promise? The creature moved to the ship's panel. It touched a sequence of points that glowed, and the air in the center of the shed began to distort shine bend. An image formed, three-dimensional, floating so real, Frank could have sworn it was there. He was a man. He wore a simple tunic. He had dark hair. He was surrounded by people who were listening intently. Frank felt all the air leave his lungs. Is that him? Is that really Jesus? Yes. Holographic recording from 2,000 years ago. Specific moment where he was trying to explain something crucial, something the church buried. Frank approached the image fascinated and terrified. What is he teaching about the real power? You have power you've used wrong your whole life, and that's why your prayers never worked. Frank stared mesmerized at the holographic image of Jesus floating in the center of the warehouse. It was so real, so detailed, that he could see every fold of his robe, every expression on his face. Is this really real? Isn't this some kind of trick? It's not a trick. It's a record like your cameras, but with much more advanced technology. It captures light, sound, even energy fields. Energy fields. Yes, everything that exists emits energetic frequency. Thoughts, emotions, intentions, everything leaves a mark that can be detected and recorded. Frank looked more closely at the image. Jesus was gesturing, speaking to a group of people, probably disciples. His expression was intense, passionate. I don't hear anything. Is there no sound? We didn't capture audio from that time, but we observed it many times. We know what he was saying through energy patterns and movement readings, and we can confirm it with surviving texts. The creature touched another spot on the panel. The scene changed. Now it showed Jesus doing something with his hands touching someone who was clearly ill, and the person got up healed. Frank felt a shiver run down his spine. He really healed people. These weren't just made-up stories. Correct, but not the way you were taught. Like this, the creature made the image freeze at the exact moment Jesus touched the sick person. See his energy field and hers. The image shifted slightly. Now there was something more, like a glowing aura surrounding both figures. Jesus shone brightly in gold. The sick person's glow was very faint, almost dull. What is that vital energy field? What some call an aura. Everyone has one, but most have a very weak one because negative thoughts and emotions drain it. Frank watched as the scene continued, and he saw something extraordinary. Jesus' bright light seemed to flow to the sick person, and her field began to glow too. He didn't heal in the sense of doing something to the person. He activated healing capacity within the person. He raised their frequency to the point where disease could no longer exist. But how? Through absolute faith. When he said, "Your faith has made you well," it wasn't a figure of speech, it was literal. One had to believe so completely, so absolutely, that physical reality rearranged itself to correspond. Frank. That sounds like pseudoscience, like that positive thinking stuff that never works. It doesn't work because they do it wrong. And I'm going to show you exactly how you do it wrong. The image changed again. Now it showed Jesus alone kneeling as if he were praying. See how he prayed? It's not how you pray. Frank watched. Jesus' eyes were closed, his hands outstretched, and he had an expression of gratitude, joy. It wasn't a posture of supplication, it was a posture of certainty. When Jesus prayed before miracles, before multiplying loaves, before healing, before any manifestation, he did not ask. He thanked as if he had already received. Saying thanks before receiving that doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense when you understand how manifestation works. Let me show you with an example. The creature gestured and the image shifted to something different. It wasn't Jesus, it was Frank. Frank recoiled, shocked. That's, that's me, simulation based on observations. I'll show you what you do every night. The image showed Frank a holographic version of himself kneeling beside the bed, hands clasped, head bowed, and Frank heard his own voice. Lord, please help me. I don't have enough money. My health is bad. I'm all alone. Please, please help me. Frank felt his face burn with shame and anger. You watched me, invaded my privacy. Sorry, but you need to see. See your energy field as you pray. The image shifted, showing an aura around the holographic Frank. It was dark gray, almost black in places, and as he prayed, it grew darker. Every word of your prayer is imbued with scarcity frequency. I have no money. I am alone. My health is bad. You are decreeing exactly what you do not want. I'm asking for help. I'm being humble. No, you are manifesting more scarcity through constant focus on it. Every thought is a seed. Every emotion is water. You plant seeds of scarcity and water them with emotions of fear and despair. And then you wonder why you reap more scarcity. Frank felt something tighten in his chest. But But it's true, I don't have enough money. My health is bad. How can I pretend it isn't? I'm not saying pretend. I'm saying stop giving energy. Stop focusing. Stop decreeing. The image returned to Jesus. See the difference. When he prayed before multiplying the loaves, he didn't say, Father, we don't have enough food. Please give us some. He said, Father, thank you for this abundance. Before it manifested as if it was already there, but the breads weren't there? Exactly. But he was operating at the frequency of abundance before abundance physically appeared. And because his frequency was so high, so right physical reality rearranged itself to match. Frank shook his head. That's crazy. Reality doesn't work that way. It works exactly like that. And you prove it every day. You think about scarcity constantly. You worry about money. You complain about your health. You focus on loneliness. And then you attract exactly that. More scarcity, more health problems, more loneliness. The law of attraction is not a theory. It is a universal law, as real as gravity. If it were that simple, everyone would be rich and healthy. It's not simple. It's constant mental discipline that most people don't have. Jesus had it. He held thoughts and emotions at such a high frequency that they manifested instantly. You hold thoughts at such a low frequency that they manifest slowly, but they manifest and they create exactly what you don't want. Frank slumped onto the workbench, his mind spinning. So you're saying that my life is like this because I created it, that it's not bad luck, it's not God's will. But I did this to myself, yes. Through decades of thinking about scarcity, worry, and fear, you have programmed reality to be exactly as it is. But I didn't know. Nobody taught me that. Jesus tried to teach, but they distorted it. They turned teachings of empowerment into a doctrine of dependence. They taught you to ask an external God instead of accessing internal power. They taught humility as weakness instead of recognizing internal strength. Frank looked at his hands, grease-stained, calloused, from decades of hard work that had never led to anything. If this is true, if I really created all of this, then can I change? Yes, but it requires a complete change in how you think, feel, and pray. It requires understanding what Jesus really taught before they distort it. Show me then, show me what he really taught. And the creature touched the panel again. The holographic image changed again. This time it showed Jesus teaching not to a crowd, but to a small group of disciples in a private setting. This moment was crucial. Jesus trying to explain something they couldn't fully understand. Frank watched. Jesus gestured emphatically. He pointed to the sky, then to his own chest, then to his disciples. He said, "The kingdom of God is within you, not in the distant heaven, not in the temple within." And then he said, "I and the Father are one, not separation, complete union." Yes, I know those verses, but I always thought he was talking about being special, a child of God. He was the Son of God. But then he said to his disciples, "You too are children of God. You too can do what I do and greater works." He wasn't claiming exclusivity. He was inviting inclusion. The scene changed. It showed Jesus in front of a fig tree. "I know that story," Frank said. "He cursed the fig tree and it withered." Yes. And then he explained it to the disciples. See, Frank watched Jesus speaking to shocked disciples, gesturing to the dry tree. He said, "If you have faith and do not doubt, you will say to this mountain, 'Be removed and thrown into the sea,' and it will be done." He didn't say, "Ask God to move a mountain." He said, "You will say, and it will be done." But that's giving too much power to humans. We are not God. They are not God. They are extensions of God. Just as a wave is not an ocean, but is made of the ocean, you have the same creative essence, just on a smaller scale. The creature made the image pause. "Frank, I'm going to show you something concrete that will prove that thought creates reality. Are you willing? Prove how simple experiment. I will give you an object, and I will teach you a technique that Jesus used, and you will manifest something small here now so that you have no doubts." Frank felt skepticism and curiosity wearing within him. What kind of object? The creature walked over to the ship and removed something. A small coin-sized crystal. It glowed softly with a blue light. "Hold this. It helps amplify intention as you learn." Frank picked up the crystal. It was warm to the touch. It pulsed gently as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Now think of something small you want to manifest, something you can check quickly. Like what? Something simple, specific number, specific word, something that would appear improbably if it were not intentional manifestation. Frank thought, okay. Number 47, that's the number my ex-wife always said was her lucky number. I haven't seen it in years. Perfect. Now don't ask to see the number. Don't expect to see it. Don't doubt it. Simply feel as if you've already seen it. Thank you for seeing it. But I haven't seen it yet. Exactly the problem. You operate in current reality. You need to operate in desired reality as if it were already real. Jesus did this perfectly. Frank closed his eyes, holding the crystal. He tried to feel gratitude for seeing the number 47, but it felt fake, forced. "It's not working. I feel ridiculous because you're trying with your mind. You need to feel with your heart. Emotion is fuel. Thought is direction. You need both." Frank tried again. This time, instead of forcing gratitude, he remembered how he felt when good things happen, that warmth in his chest, that lightness, and he held on to that feeling. He imagined seeing the number 47 somewhere unlikely, and he was grateful as if it had already happened. He stayed like that for maybe 2 minutes. Then he opened his eyes. And now live normally, but watch. Within 24 hours, you will see number 47 in an unlikely context. And when you see it, you will know you have manifested. Frank put the crystal in his pocket, skeptical. What if I don't see it? You will see. If you really felt it, if you really believed in those moments, high emotion plus clear intention, guaranteed manifestation, it's the law. Like gravity. Frank didn't believe it. But the next day, something strange happened. He was driving into town to buy groceries when his car started making a strange noise. He pulled over to the side of the road and got out to check. Flat tire. Great, he grumbled. One more thing. He opened the trunk looking for the spare tire. And there on the inside of the trunk lid, a place he never looked, was an old faded sticker. Number 47. Frank froze. He looked closer. It was a vehicle inspection sticker from years ago. Identification number 47. No, he whispered. It can't be a coincidence. But as he changed the tire, his mind was spinning. That sticker had always been there. He just never noticed. It wasn't a manifestation. It was, it was just him finally seeing something that was already there. Or was it when he arrived in town, he went to the supermarket? In the checkout line, he picked up a random magazine. He opened it to a random page. Big headline, 47 Ways to Improve Your Life. Frank dropped the magazine. His hands were shaking. Okay, twice, but it could still be a coincidence. Number 47 wasn't that rare, but then paying for groceries, the change was $470, and invoice number 47, those are in 47, and the license plate of the car that parked next to his TRK 4700. Frank sat in the car, breathing fast. 5 times 5 manifestations of the same number in less than 6 hours. That's not possible, he whispered. I didn't do it. I can't have done it. But the crystal in his pocket pulsed gently as if saying, yes, you did. When he returned to the property, the creature was still there, preparing the ship for departure, but waiting for Frank to return. Did you see I saw it 5 times 5? How is that possible? Because you manifested. For the first time in your life, you did it right. You felt heightened emotion. You had clear intentions. You didn't doubt for those moments. And reality responded. Frank sat down heavily. But those were small things, numbers. What if I want to manifest something bigger? Real money, real health. Same principle. It just requires more focus, more time, more emotional consistency. And most importantly, it requires stopping contradicting manifestation with constant negative thoughts. What do you mean you can do manifestation exercises for 5 minutes? But if you spend the rest of the day thinking, I don't have any money, it never works, I'm unlucky, you cancel manifestation. Every negative thought is a decree against what you want. Frank thought about how many times a day he complained, worried, focused on problems. Hundreds, maybe thousands. So I need to control every thought. Yes, it's the hardest work there is. Jesus did it naturally. You'll have to do it consciously until it becomes natural, but it is possible. And if you really master this, you can manifest anything. Health, wealth, relationships, anything. Like Jesus manifested bread, fish, healings. Frank looked at his own hands, then at the alien ship, then at the sky through the shed door. Everything he believed about life, about God, about how reality worked, was incomplete. Jesus had tried to teach this, and the church had hidden it. Why, Frank asked. Why hide it? Because people who understand their own power don't need institutions. They don't depend on religious authorities. They become free. And freedom is dangerous for those who profit from dependence. The next day, Frank tried to return to normal life, but he couldn't. The crystal was still in his pocket. The creature was still in the warehouse preparing the ship, and the numbers 47 kept appearing. On the electricity bill that arrived, due date the 4th, amount $47. On the car radio, a station he never listened to, FM 94.7, on the clock when he woke up in the middle of the night, 4:47 a.m. Stop it, Frank yelled into the empty room. I get it. Okay, I get it. But I hadn't understood. Not really. Because accepting that he manifested numbers meant accepting something much bigger, something terrifying. It meant that his entire life, every failure, every disappointment, every moment of loneliness, he had created not God, not bad luck, not external circumstances. He and that responsibility was too heavy. On the morning of the 3rd day after the experiment, Frank avoided the shed. He made coffee. He sat on the porch. He tried to pretend everything was normal. He tried not to think about the alien creature. He tried not to think about Jesus teaching manifestation. He tried not to think about the 40 years he wasted praying wrong. But the thoughts came anyway. What if I had known this before? He muttered to no one. What if I had understood it when I was 20? When I was 30, before the divorce, before I lost the house, before he stopped, because he realized what he was doing, I was focusing on the past, on the loss on the waste. And according to the creature, each such thought was a decree. It was a manifestation of more loss, more waste. Damn. He squeezed his eyes shut. I can't control it. Thoughts just appear. The voice came telepathically, even with the creature inside the shed, 50 miles away. Frank, I can feel your conflict from here. Want to talk? No. He's scared. Of course I'm scared. Frank stood up, pacing back and forth. You're telling me I've controlled my entire life without knowing it, that I've created all my misery. How am I not supposed to be scared, Thormerd, of that? Silence for a moment, then come to the shed. I need to show you one more thing. Last thing before I leave, Frank hesitated. Part of him wanted to refuse. He wanted the creature to simply go away and take all these disturbing truths with it. But another part, the part that had manifested those numbers, that had felt power for the first time in decades, that part needed to know more. He walked slowly to the shed. The creature stood beside the ship, which now glowed softly, obviously functional, ready to depart. Are you leaving? Frank asked, feeling a strange mixture of relief and panic. Yes, but first you need to see something about why you're resisting. I'm not resisting. I'm just processing. You're afraid of power because power means responsibility. And responsibility means you can no longer blame anyone else for your life. Frank felt his face heat up. That's not fair. It's true, and I'll show you. The creature activated the hologram again. But this time it wasn't Jesus. It was Frank himself. Several versions of him at different points in his life. Frank at 25 arguing violently with his wife. Frank at 35 being fired from his job. Frank at 45 sitting alone in a small apartment after a divorce. Frank at in the hospital after a heart problem. You blamed her for the separation. The creature pointed to the first scene. You blamed your boss for the dismissal. You blamed genetics for your poor health. You blamed God for not helping. Because it wasn't my fault, Frank yelled. She was the one who cheated. Boss was unfair. Genetics I can't control. But you attracted all of this through the energetic frequency you emitted. Years of thinking I'm not good enough. It never works out for me. Everyone abandons me. You decreed it. And then you attracted situations that confirmed it. Frank felt something break inside him. So you're saying I deserved everything, that I deserved to be betrayed, that I deserved to lose everything. He didn't deserve it, but he showed it. There is a difference. What difference? Deserving implies punishment. It implies that someone decided you should suffer, but no one did. You simply operated at a frequency of suffering for so long that reality matched it. The law of attraction is not moral judgment. It is physics. Frank turned away, unable to look at the images. I can't stand this. I can't stand knowing it was me, that it was always me. But Frank, the creature's voice softened. If you created suffering, you can create joy. If you manifested loss, you can manifest gain. If you attracted loneliness, you can attract connection. Power works both ways. Frank was silent, shoulders shaking. For 62 years, you were a victim of an unresponsive God, a victim of bad luck, a victim of other people. And being a victim is comfortable because you don't have to change. You don't have to take responsibility. It's not comfortable. It's horrible. But it's familiar. And familiar feels safe even when it destroys you. Frank finally turned around, eyes red. How do I change? How do I stop being a victim after a lifetime of being one? one thought at a time, one emotion at a time. Jesus said, watch and pray. Watching means constantly observing thoughts, catching the negative ones before they gain power, and praying means decreeing desired reality with an emotion of certainty. The creature walked over to Frank. It placed a long, strange hand on his shoulder. The touch was surprisingly gentle. You are not alone in this. Billions of humans operate on victim frequencies. It's culturally programmed, reinforced by media's religions, educational systems, all telling you that you are powerless, that you need external saviors. So how do some people succeed? How do some thrive while others don't? Because consciously or unconsciously, they operate on a frequency of abundance. They think differently, they feel differently, and then they attract differently. Frank wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Give me a concrete example. Something I can do tomorrow. Tomorrow when you wake up, before you do anything, spend 5 minutes feeling gratitude. Not for the things you have because your mind will reject them as false, but for the things you will have. Feel as if you already have them. Perfect health, loving relationships, financial abundance. Feel the thrill of having them. And be thankful. What if I can't feel it? What if it feels fake? It will feel fake at first, but faking it until you make it still works because the brain doesn't distinguish between real and vividly imagined experience. If you feel the emotion of abundance, even artificially at first, your body releases the same chemicals. Cells respond, your energy field changes. Frank nodded slowly, and the rest of the day observe your thoughts. When you catch a negative one, I have no money, no one loves me. Any variation is stop immediately and replace it. Money flows easily to me. I am loved. Even if you don't fully believe it, yet repeat it until you do. That sounds exhausting. It is for a few months, but then it becomes automatic. Like Jesus, he didn't need to try to keep his frequency high. It was natural. You'll get there too. And how long will it take to see real changes? Small things, days or weeks. Bigger things, months. But every little manifestation will strengthen your faith. And faith, absolute certainty, speeds everything up. Frank looked at the ship, almost ready to leave. When are you leaving tomorrow at dawn? But Frank, the creature, grabbed both of his shoulders, now forcing him to look into those infinite black eyes. Promise you'll try. Promise you won't fall back into old patterns. How do you know I won't? I don't know. Free will is absolute. You can choose to return to victimhood. Most people do. It's easier. But you have the potential for more. I saw it while I was repairing the ship. Discipline focused the ability to solve complex problems. If you direct that to your mind. Frank took a deep breath. I'll try. I don't promise success, but I promise to try. That's all I ask. That night, Frank barely slept, his mind spinning with everything he learned. Jesus wasn't who the church said he was. God wasn't who religion said he was. And he himself wasn't who he always thought he was. It was terrifying, but also liberating. And for the first time in decades, Frank felt something strange growing in his chest. Hope. Not passive hope of maybe things will get better, but active hope of I will make things better. And that changed everything. Frank woke up at 5:47 in the morning, the number again. He looked at his watch, and instead of frustration, he felt something different, almost like recognition, as if the universe were saying, we're paying attention. He got up, he made coffee, and then sitting on the edge of the bed, he decided to do what the creature had suggested. 5 minutes of gratitude for what I didn't have yet. He closed his eyes. At first, he felt ridiculous. How was he giving thanks for things that didn't exist? But then he remembered it wasn't about what existed. It was about feeling like it existed. He took a deep breath and began to imagine perfect health. What would it be like waking up without back pain, climbing stairs without getting out of breath, having energy all day long? He held that image and tried to feel gratitude for it. In the beginning, nothing, just emptiness, but then a spark, small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Warmth in the chest, lightness, as if for a second his body believed this was real. He continued, Financial abundance, not millions, just enough. Paying bills without stress, buying what I needed without calculating every penny, having a reserve for emergencies. The sensation grew, the warmth spread. Relationships, not necessarily romance, just connection. Friendship, someone to talk to, not being so completely alone. And for the first time in years, Frank felt tears, but not of sadness. Of something I couldn't name, hope, possibility, or just the relief of finally letting go of the burden of being a victim. When he opened his eyes, 7 minutes had passed, and something was different. Not externally, but internally. As if a door that had been locked for decades had opened just a crack. Frank wiped his face, picked up his coffee cup, and walked to the shed. I needed to see the creature one last time before leaving. But when he opened the shed door, he stopped completely. The ship was different, not just repaired, but transformed. It glowed with a gently pulsing inner light, and there were symbols on the surface that Frank swore hadn't been there before. Symbols that seemed to change as he looked as if they were alive. You see differently now. The telepathic voice came from inside the ship. The creature emerged, and Frank noticed something strange. It also looked different, lighter, more defined. What changed? Frank asked. Nothing has changed externally, but your perception has changed. You raised your frequency slightly this morning. And at higher frequency, you see more. It's always been there. You just couldn't perceive it before. Frank approached the ship. He reached out to touch the symbols. The moment his fingers touched the surface, something happened. Vision, not with eyes, but within the mind. He saw Jesus again, but not as a hologram. It was as if he were there in Galilee 2,000 years ago. Jesus was teaching, and Frank could hear not exact words, more like concepts, direct understanding. When two or more gather in my name, I am there. And Frank understood. Jesus wasn't talking about church. He was talking about frequency. When two or more people operate on a frequency of love, gratitude, and certainty, Christ consciousness manifests between them. I did not come to be served, but to serve. Service didn't mean subservience. It meant elevating others, sharing knowledge, helping others awaken to their own power. Let the dead bury their dead. The dead weren't physically dead. They were those operating at such a low frequency that they were dead to possibilities, trapped in cycles of victimization and suffering. The vision continued, image after image, teaching after teaching. And Frank saw the pattern. Jesus never taught dependence. He taught empowerment. He never taught that God was distant. He taught that God was within. He never taught that you were a powerless sinner. He taught that you were a forgotten creator. The vision ended. Frank stepped back from the ship, his breath coming in short gasps. What was that information download? Ship responds to higher consciousness. When you touched a higher state, it transferred knowledge. But, but was it real? Did Jesus really teach this? Yes, and much more. But I filtered only the essentials. More than that would overload your mind. Frank looked at his hands. They were still trembling slightly. I feel like I've woken up from a 60-year dream. In a way, it woke up. Most humans live in a trance, programmed from birth to believe they are powerless, that they need external authorities, God, government, experts to save them. And Jesus tried to break that trance. Exactly. That's why they killed him. Power doesn't like awakened people. Awakened people don't blindly obey. They think, they question. They create their own reality. Frank walked around the ship slowly. So what happened after he died? How did the teachings get so distorted? They transformed teachings of empowerment into a doctrine of sin and external salvation. And the church built an empire on this distortion. Why? Why intentionally distort? Because people who understand their own power don't need intermediaries. They don't pay tithes. They don't blindly obey. The church would have lost control. So they emphasize sin, guilt, the need for external salvation. And they hid real teachings. Frank felt anger rising. 60 years. 60 years believing he was powerless. That God decided everything. that he had no control. How many lives were wasted, he said softly. How many people died without knowing they had power, billions over 2 millennia? But Frank the creature moved closer. Anger doesn't help. Anger is low frequency. It keeps you trapped. How can I not be angry? Transforming anger into purpose. You know now so you can help others know. Not by preaching that only breeds resistance, but by example. When your life begins to change, people will notice. They will ask, and then you teach. Frank took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within. What if no one believes me? What if they try to ridicule me? So let go. It's not your job to convince. It's your job to live truthfully. Those who are ready to listen will listen. Those who aren't won't, and that's okay. The creature returned to the ship. He touched the panel. The surface began to glow more intensely. Is it time? Yes. But before I go, one last gift. The creature extended its hand. In it were 3 crystals, like the one Frank had used before, but these glowed more brightly. These are amplifiers. Use them when you meditate, when you practice manifestation. They will help until your natural frequency rises enough. Frank picked up the crystals. They were heavier than they looked, and they vibrated gently. How do I use it? Hold one during morning meditation. Carry another in your pocket during the day. Place a third under your pillow at night. They will help you maintain a high frequency even when your mind tries to revert to old patterns. Will it really work, Frank? In the last 3 days, you have manifested a specific number multiple times. You have had a direct download of information from higher consciousness, and you have felt a change in your own energy field. Do you still have doubt? Frank looked at the crystals, then at the creature, then at the impossible ship in his shed. No, I don't doubt it anymore. Good, because doubt is poison for manifestation. Jesus said, do not doubt in your heart because doubt cancels intention. It is the frequency of I do not have competing with the frequency of I have. So how do I stop doubting? Through evidence. Every small manifestation strengthens certainty. So start small. Numbers, synchronicities, unexpected encounters. As evidence accumulates, doubt naturally disappears. The ship began to make a low sound, almost like humming. It was waking up. Frank Morrison, the creature said formally, you repaired my ship when you could have denounced me. You showed compassion when you could have shown fear, and you are willing to change when most would choose to remain in the comfortable prison of victimhood. Thank you for everything, for showing me the truth. Truth has always been available, just waiting for you to be ready to see it. The creature entered the ship. The door, which had no defined shape, just an opening that appeared and disappeared, began to close. Wait, Frank shouted. Will I see you again? Will you come back? The telepathic voice came one last time. If you truly master what I've taught you, Frank, you won't need me to come back because you'll be operating at a frequency where you can access any knowledge directly, just like Jesus did. Goodbye, my friend. And remember, thought creates emotion, amplifies certainty, manifests. That's the formula. Use it wisely, and the door closed completely. The ship rose soundlessly. It floated for a moment, and then in the blink of an eye, it was gone. It didn't fly up. It just stopped being there. Frank stood alone in the shed, holding 3 crystals, his mind filled with knowledge the church had hidden for 2,000 years. And for the first time in his entire life, he felt truly free. 3 months later, Frank Morrison stood in the same field where the spacecraft had landed. But he was a different man, not outwardly. He was still 62, still had the callous hands of a mechanic. But something fundamental had changed. In the first few days after the creature's departure, Frank had doubted. I'd wake up thinking I'd imagined it all, that I'd had some kind of mental breakdown. But the crystals were there, real solid, impossible to explain. And then he started practicing every day, 5 minutes in the morning, feeling gratitude for what I didn't yet have. Observing thoughts throughout the day, capturing the negative ones, replacing them with affirmative ones. For the first few days, nothing happened. Then little things began. Synchronicities, unexpected encounters. Opportunities appearing out of nowhere. A former colleague called, offering freelance work. I thought of you out of the blue, he said. I need someone who understands old engines. Frank accepted. The pay was better than he expected. Then a neighbor he barely knew showed up asking for help fixing her tractor. They chatted. She mentioned that she organized a study group on spirituality. You should come sometime, she said casually. Frank went, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. But the most profound change was internal. Frank stopped complaining not because he forced himself to, but because he realized that every complaint was a decree. It was an order to the universe. Give me more of this to complain about. He stopped focusing on bills he couldn't pay. He started focusing on the money that was flowing in, even if it was small amounts at first. He stopped seeing himself as a victim of ill health. He began to see himself as someone who was regaining vitality, and his body responded. His back pain subsided, energy increased. It wasn't an instant miracle. It was a gradual, consistent change built on daily choices. And now, 3 months later, looking up at the sky where the ship had disappeared, Frank finally understood Jesus had not come to create religion. He had come to awaken humanity, to remember that every human being carries a divine spark. That thought creates reality, that there is no separation between creator and created. I and the Father are one. It wasn't blasphemy, it was literal truth. You are not separate from Source. You are Source experiencing itself through physical form. And when you understand that, really understand it, not just intellectually, but viscerally, everything changes. You stop asking, you start decreeing, you stop doubting, you start knowing. You stop waiting for external salvation. You begin to access inner power. Frank heard a car approaching. He turned and saw the pastor of the local church leaving, Pastor Williams, a man Frank had known for years but never had the courage to question. Until now, Frank, I heard you haven't been going to church, the pastor said, trying to sound casual but clearly concerned. Everything okay? Frank smiled. Not a smile of confrontation, a smile of genuine peace. Everything's great, Pastor, better than it's been in a long time. But you need community. You need the Word of God. You can't just stop congregating. I didn't stop connecting with God. I just stopped outsourcing that connection. Pastor Williams frowned. What does that mean? Frank took a deep breath. He knew what he was about to say would sound heretical, but he couldn't pretend anymore. Pastor, for 60 years I prayed. I asked for help. I was faithful and nothing changed because I was taught that I was powerless, that God decided everything, that I could only wait and have faith. And that's how it works. Frank, no, it is not. Jesus taught exactly the opposite. He said, you will do greater works. He said, the kingdom is within you. He said, whatever you ask, believe that you have received it. He was teaching active manifestation, not passive waiting. Frank, you are misinterpreting the scriptures. I'm interpreting it as Jesus meant it before Paul distorted it, before the church built an empire on guilt and dependence. Pastor Williams blushed. Watch your words. You're bordering on blasphemy. Or am I telling the truth that scares you? Frank said softly. Because if people understand their own power, they will no longer need institutions. They will no longer tithe for buildings and salaries. They will become free. You need prayer, Frank. You need to get back on track. Frank placed a gentle hand on the pastor's shoulder. I'm on the path for the first time in my life. And if you really read what Jesus taught, not what you were taught he taught, but what he actually said, you would understand. Pastor William stepped back. I will pray for your soul. And he walked away, clearly disturbed. Frank felt no anger, no judgment, just sadness for everyone who remained trapped. But he also knew each person had their own journey. It wasn't his job to force awakening. It was his job to live truthfully and let his example speak for itself. That evening, Frank sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The three crystals formed a triangle on the table beside him, and for the first time in decades, he felt deep gratitude, not for material things, although life was improving in that regard too, but gratitude for knowledge, for truth, for finally understanding how reality really worked. Thought creates emotion, amplifies certainty, manifests. This was the formula, the same one Jesus used, the same one that was hidden, the same one he now carried. And as stars appeared above, Frank made a silent promise. I would live this truth. I would manifest an extraordinary life, not out of ego, but by example. Because when others saw transformation in him, they would ask and then he would teach. Not through preaching, not through forced conversion, but through the gentle sharing of knowledge that changed everything. He fixed alienship. And in return, he received truth about Jesus that no church had ever taught. A truth that I would carry for the rest of my life and use it to create the reality you always deserved but never knew you could manifest. Frank Morrison's journey reveals something you may have suspected but never had the courage to fully admit. You have more power than you have been taught, much more. Jesus didn't come to create a religion of dependency. He came to awaken humanity to the inner creative power we all carry. Thought creates reality. Emotion amplifies manifestation. Certainty transforms possibility into inevitability. This is not theory. It is universal law as real as gravity. And now you have a choice. You can close this knowledge. Return to the comfort zone of victimhood. Continue believing that life simply happens to you, not through you. Or you can do what Frank did. Start observing your thoughts. Capture the negative ones. Replace them with affirmative ones. Feel gratitude for what you haven't yet manifested. Operate on a frequency of certainty rather than a frequency of doubt. It won't be easy. Decades of programming don't disappear overnight, but each small manifestation will strengthen your certainty. And certainty is fuel for greater manifestations. And because I know many of you are ready to go deeper, I'm writing a book dedicated precisely to this awakening, a practical guide to help you apply these principles in your own life. Real techniques, concrete exercises. If you're interested, let us know in the comments. Once it's available, the link will be pinned below so you can secure your copy. So I ask you, what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to ignore it because it defies what you were taught, or will you try it even if just out of curiosity and see what happens? Leave your response in the comments. Tell us if anything in this story resonated with you. If you've noticed patterns in your own life where negative thoughts manifested negative reality, and if you're ready for this awakening, and if you want more stories like this, stories that challenge what you think you know and open doors to greater possibilities, and you deserve to know.